This is such a high risk. We see people saying, oh, we mustn't have these wet markets. Yeah, you're right, but we also mustn't have factory farming. I'm Vicky Bond, I'm the Managing Director for the Humane League in the UK, and I'm a trained veterinarian. I also have a Master's in Environment Development and Policy, and I've been working in animal protection now for over 9 years. A zoonotic disease is a disease that can transmit from animals to humans, and that doesn't have to be necessarily a bacteria, in the case of E. coli and Salmonella, which we might know of in food poisoning cases, but it's also viruses, such as obviously the COVID-19 virus, but bird flu we're very familiar with, swine flu. These are very familiar viruses that are zoonotic diseases, and in fact 3 out of 4 infectious diseases come originally from animals. So wet markets are a prime location for zoonotic diseases to happen in terms of be spread. That's because you often have different animals stacked up in cages next to each other, but the real risk is the chickens and the pigs and the animals that are very prone to getting diseases that we are very prone to catching. And so yes, wet markets are a problem, but factory farms are also a major problem, and that's because there are tens of thousands of animals all confined into these small spaces under stress, much more prone to catching disease in the first place, and they often get diseases like influenza, like the flu, so bird flu or swine flu, that is more easily contractable to humans than say other species that may get diseases that's less easy to be contracted. We know from recent influenza outbreaks that are happening in China right now from chickens that they have a mortality rate as high as 60%. And there are people saying this is probably a dress rehearsal for an influenza outbreak such as the avian influenza, the bird flu cases that we're seeing right now on factory farms. Those are the same factory farms that we have in the US, they're the same factory farms as we have here in Europe. That is not different, and that is not about bats. Factory farms are like a vat, and that's simply because you have vast numbers of animals, so we're talking of tens of thousands of animals in the case of chickens, or thousands in the case of pigs, in a confined space. They're under stress because they're in barren conditions, they're filthy, and it is the perfect place for disease to run rife. These animals also are all one breed. Their genotype is not very varied, and what that means is if one animal gets infected, it's very likely to affect all of them. And so you can get a disease that comes into the shed and infects all the shed, and then the worker will come in, become infected from the animals, leave the shed of course to go back to their family or whatever, and then spread that disease. We really have to stop factory farming. It is paramount in securing our future against these pandemics. I think now, while people have been talking about infectious diseases, zoonotic diseases being a risk, bird flu or swine flu, I think it's more obvious than ever. We also need to consider it. And finally, there's antibiotic resistance, which is something we should really be worried about. And we know that 700,000 people are dying every year from diseases that can't be treated by antibiotics anymore because they become resistant. And antibiotics are used widely in factory farms. We need to end factory farming, not just for the animals, but also to prevent the next pandemic.